Now let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. Jason Noble, Chief of Product Strategy at ikaun, and Alister Harwood, the Director of Transport Work Winning Leader at Arup. Take it away, Alister and Jason.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Darby, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening for all of those joining. My name is Jason Noble. I'm co-founder of ikaun, and ikaun is an organization that's really all about helping our clients generate revenue and win more business. And really why we do this is from personal experience. I've spent the better part of 25 years building consulting and technology consulting organizations, and a specific need for building a business is generating new revenue, winning pitches and proposals. And that's really why we built ikaun, to focus on some of the hardships that you may be experiencing when you're responding to these very large RFPs and actually even doing very quick capability type documents. And with me, I have the pleasure of working with Alister Harwood on a pretty large engagement, pretty large project where we really transformed how Arup is managing their CVs and really helping them to respond to these, like I said, very, very complex RFPs and proposals. And so what we're going to do here today, it's really going to be a conversation with Alister, learn about Alister, learn about his experience, talk a lot about the problems that he's faced through his very long, illustrious career. So we're going to learn a lot about Alister, learn a lot about Arup, and then we're also going to talk about the solution that we had the pleasure of implementing into Arup, which was really all about, like I said, automating the CV process, automating pitches and proposals, which, as you know, can be a daunting task. So we'll talk about the problem that was being experienced. We'll talk about the solution, and we really do want to focus on some of the results and the impact. And our goal here is to share with you what we found in deploying this technology. And as you know, these technology deployments are not just about the product itself. It really is about organizing a pretty dynamic team. In Arup's situation, it was a global team across every time zone. So there were challenges and solutions that we put in place to help this team get really, really organized. So with that, I wanted to introduce Alister, and maybe Alister, you want to tell us just a little bit about your experience, because I think we could probably spend the whole hour just learning about your career.
God forbid. God forbid. Hi everyone. Hopefully there's some colleagues and some competitors out there listening to this. I'm Alister Harwood. I work at Arup, which is a global, primarily an engineering consultancy business, primarily based in the UK, but we have branches in almost every geography, and we've got over 18,000 people. I myself have coming up for 30 years experience of working in bids, mostly in the public sector, which has its own, foibles and challenges, but also some public sector, private sector experience as well. And latterly, I've focused on transport sector bids, so highways, a lot of rail, high-speed rail, metros, that kind of thing, and some aviation and ports thrown in as well.
Yeah, and your title, winning leader, that I don't think I've ever seen that title anywhere, but I like it. What's kind of the basis of that? Is it just that your mission is winning new business? Is that kind of where that comes from?
Yes. Yeah, I think the whole sort of construction sector, certainly in the UK, and I think probably worldwide, has been on a bit of a journey in professionalizing how we go about winning new work. Currently I work in a consultancy. That's where I started my career, but I have had probably 14 or 15 years working in contractors, actually building stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think contractors have long had the mindset that if it isn't core to their business, they'll either outsource it or they'll set up a specialist team and they'll do it. And so I was lucky enough to start my career at a very innovative fit-out company, and that taught me a lot. and then I progressed to Balfour Beatty, which is a big UK contractor, and learned more. But in those two companies, the bidding team, the work winning team, processed pretty much every bid that those companies did. I think it's slightly different in many consultancies, and I think Arup is fairly typical in that there is a sort of belief, right, we're talking among friends, aren't we? There's a kind of belief that all our people write reports, so all of our people can write bids, right? Which is sometimes true, or often true. But I think the role of the work winning team in those kind of companies is more about obviously working directly on the bigger and most strategic bids, but also sharing best practice, showing by involving people. So, other people learn by doing, keeping abreast of new developments, such as the ones we're going to be talking about today. And just adding a bit of sort of salt and pepper to the mix, I suppose, of some seasoned big professionals to supplement the technical teams.
Yeah. So, and thanks for that background. I think that it's it's important to understand kind of where you came from, and understand all of your experience. So why don't we move into, maybe let's just talk a little bit about where Arup was at. I guess it was a few years ago now, maybe 3 years ago or so, 2 or 3 years ago. And let's talk a little bit about specifically the problem, or what are some of the typical problems that a firm like Arup encounters when doing large RFPs, when responding to pitches and proposals, and then also talk about specifically the CV automation portion. I mean, that was a very, very large portion of this. But let's talk maybe a little bit about some of the challenges that you all faced a few years ago related to responding to proposals.
Sure. Yeah. I think in any business like ours, there's always a balance between information that you collect and store and maintain just in case it's needed, versus information that you gather on a just-in-time basis to answer a specific question in an RFP or ITT. And that sort of realization hit me probably about 10 or 15 years ago when I was at Balfour Beatty, and it suddenly dawned on me that information collected on a just-in-case basis has a cost to it, because one, you've got to invest in actually going out and collecting it to start with, and two, you've got to maintain it, haven't you? Because it very quickly goes out of date. But it's still worth doing for the information that you need to lay your hands on very often.
And so an example of like just in case might be a data sheet, a practice data sheet. It might be a CV. Is that what you're referring to? Is these kind of just in case elements?
Yeah, and people out there will all be able to think of their examples of just in case information, and all the certifications that the company has, probably awards that the company has got, standard statements on statutory requirements, that kind of thing. And different companies I've been in have different extent of that just in case information available, usually on the intranet. The just in time stuff is more often it's about our approach to solving a particular problem, a methodology for designing a particular type of tunnel or highway or something, or I don't know, our track record in having designed a particular type of mechanical electrical installation for a data center, or something that's a bit more niche. You wouldn't necessarily invest lots of time in going out and gathering that information just in case it was needed once a year. But it would be handy to know who in the company to go to, who would be able to give you that information, during a bid or in the preparation stage for a bid.
So it's a little bit more responsive to maybe the RFP that's coming in or the bid. If it's something around architecting a bridge, designing a bridge, you might not have a pre-built piece of content that describes this very complex problem, because every bridge, I'm assuming, is a little bit different, right? So the approach might be a little bit different. You might have a framework, but you need to approach it based on the requirements being provided. Is that kind of what you're talking about on the just in case?
Yeah, and it's sort of it comes out of feedback that we often get after we've won or lost a bid, and particularly when we've lost a bid. One of the recurring themes is, we didn't squeeze so highly because you weren't project specific enough. It all felt a bit generic, which so and that's completely understandable. They want a solution to the specific problem or situation that they find themselves in, and they'll get comfort from a supplier that gives them the confidence that yes, they really understand that particulars around that situation. One, that they've done it before, but they can adapt what they've done before, learn from what they've done before, and apply it in a future new situation. Yeah. They don't just want a sort of cookie cutter approach, stamping out the same thing again and again and again. It doesn't make them feel listened to or special.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point there, which is that what I've noticed over my career is that when you receive an RFP, really one of the key aspects of differentiating in that RFP response is clarity in communicating that you understand their specific needs and specificity in how you're going to solve their problem, right? So you may have a project that is very, very similar to the RFP that's sitting in front of you, but if you just take the description of that project and paste it into your RFP response, might be similar, but it's not talking to the client. It's not the specific client need. So I think that's a really, really important takeaway here is that the difference between one of the significant differences between winning and losing on an RFP is how specifically you're answering their need and not just based on what you've done in the past.
Yeah, and that's quite apart from all the other variations that happen between tenders. That the length of the response changes in word count or page count. The order of the sub questions change. The marking criteria change from one client to another or one bid to another. So all of those things have to be factored into your response to make sure it's all about points and prizes, particularly in public sector procurement, because they want a nice clear audit trail of why they've awarded company X the contract and not company Y. Slightly different in the private sector because they're not all necessarily under that duty of transparency and clarity and quality, but they still want to be able to justify a decision that's been made, particularly an important one involving spending millions of dollars or pounds.
Yeah. I think that, if we were to think about wins and losses, and we were thinking about it from the client feedback perspective, you might hear, if you lost an RFP, the response might be, well, you haven't really thought about our exact needs, right? And so if you think about, well, what would their response be if you actually won the RFP? Oftentimes it would be, well, you clearly demonstrated that you thought about our needs and you demonstrated how you're going to solve our problems. Yes, you supplemented that with past experience, but you really thought about our problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's drill a little bit into this concept of how you can potentially differentiate within that proposal. And one of the things that we talked about was maybe building in the perfect team, right? So we talked about how responding to the project needs and making sure that you're communicating your understanding of their specific needs, but how do you layer the right people to present to that client? Instead of, you could say, hey, here are 150 different skilled folks that could meet your requirements. What's your thought process on who do we highlight? Do we just highlight the fellows, I think as you may have called them at Arup? Do we just highlight our top of the top, or how do we kind of create a diverse team that really communicates our experience and our ability to meet the requirements?
Yeah, well, I think this is one of the areas that is perhaps a little bit more specific to consultants, professional services companies like mine, as opposed to contractors. Is that focus on the team, because a consultant or professional services firm really all we're selling is the expertise about people. Whereas, when I worked in a contractor, a lot of the scoring, a lot of the importance in the tender was the methodology, the sequence and program, the price, of course. The team was important, but I think from what I've seen, and come back to Arup, the team in an Arup bid consulting bids is much more important. We put on average probably 10 to a dozen CVs in every single proposal we do, from the tiny ones right up to the mega bids of where the value of our services is measured in tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars or pounds. So the ability to one, select the right team, and then to present them in such a way that their strengths really shine through, and their fit into our proposed team, and their fit with the client's team and what the client wants them to do, needs them to do. That is a massive part of our bids.
Yeah, and so I think one of the things was, it's a great point, which is that, yes, you could provide their CV kind of as is, like, here's your stock CV. And, for the folks on the webinar, maybe you have an L drive or an S drive, whatever, that has potentially thousands of CVs. But to your point, it's really important that if you're including those 10 folks, if you're bidding on, again, going back to that bridge example or whatever the example might be, highlighting each one of those individuals' experience specifically as it's relevant to the client's project, I think that's what you're getting at, right? Like making sure that it's customized to that specific RFP or bid.
Well, it's even a problem before that, Jason, because you've got to find them first. Yes, in the old days when we had a sort of J drive full of Word or PDF CVs, yeah, that was searchable to an extent, but we'll come on to some of the ways that the ikaun product allows searching. So I think in the old days, the selection relied very much on what was in the bid director's head and what the people they knew from either having worked with them in the past or encountering them in the company or what have you. So our ability to objectively select the best of Arup, I think in the old days that was, I don't want to say hit and miss, but it was less rigorous,
less efficient, less accurate, right? Yeah. And oftentimes it's hard to find those specific individuals based on their past experience. Yes, you can do a search on the L drive, and you kind of hope and pray that the search engine actually returns some good results. But oftentimes you want to have very, very complex searches, right? Sometimes it's location specific. Sometimes having a person in a specific location is key to that specific project. And then also drilling down into their experience. Maybe it's, hey, I need to find someone in this particular location that also has experience in a particular industry, right? So the ability to find those people, I think, is what you're saying is that first critical step.
Yeah, and it could be language requirements, could be lots of things. And I think in small companies, say up to about 500 people, it probably is just about possible to have for one person to have a decent picture of a lot of people, all the key people in that company. But when, like we are now, over 18,000 spread across, as you said, all time zones, you just can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's impossible for you to one, stay up to date on who's being hired, right? Who's new to Arup, right? It's just an impossible task.
Yeah, and some of the biggest projects that we're involved in, major city metros, that kind of thing, they really do demand the best global skills. So even if we just I knew the 500 best people in London, say that wouldn't get us.
Yeah. And with ikaun, we did extensive work on allowing you to find people based on any number of different facets. And the one that I found most interesting was once we imported all of your, I think we imported 9,000 or 10,000 word-based CVs. One of the things that was really interesting was that ikaun gave you the ability to find people with experience in those specific industries and business sectors, right? So you categorize your work as in those industries and those sectors. And previously, it was almost impossible to get that level of granularity of understanding, well, show me all of the people that have done work in a particular sector, right?
Yeah, and you remember one of the things that happened when we did all that import was you could point out all the inconsistencies and errors.
Yes. There was definitely work on kind of normalize or rationalizing at times the taxonomy that was in place.
Yeah, because again, if you want to be able to do a global search or a much wider search, first of all, you need a much more consistent way of describing and categorizing different facets of people's experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And another aspect was the more so we have these kind of high level buckets of, hey, show me people with experience in a particular business or a particular sector. But then we get down into the real granularity, which is around your expertise matrices, right? So the ability to, as an example, jump into I don't know, maybe we're looking for somebody with specific experience in modeling, maybe in 3D Studio Max. Maybe we're looking, there were some really granular things that I remember. The one that always kind of stood out to me was in the aviation space for airport development. I guess there are experts that understand baggage, right? And probably baggage systems, right? So being able to get down to that level of granularity, also the ability to for individuals to kind of self-assess, like how much experience do they have on baggage systems? Do they have 10 years, 15 years? How many projects have they done, right? So even being able to drill down into their individual skills was pretty important.
Yeah, we had those skills expertise matrices before ikaun. And that is all, that setup is all administered by Arup University, looks after all the learning development and skills networks. I think what ikaun allowed us to do was to surface it, bring it to people's attention much more obviously, and to combine it with their CV profile information to do, and then you can really start doing some very powerful searches, because as well as all the slicers on those expertise and skills matrices, you can combine that with almost like free text searches through their project experience, to really narrow down on the people who have, like you say, the real niche expertise, and to clients, that the ability for us to make those kind of experts available to them, that's very, very valuable to them, I think, and that's sort of thing they like. I think in terms of, going back to one of your early questions, where do you decide, how many, how far through the organisation to go? Do you just put your superstars up there, all the directors, or how far? We took the early decision that, one, it would be a global system. There's no point in just trying to roll it out in one geography or one group. To really make a difference, it had to be global. Two, I think we decided it had to be universal, so that when an Arup grad or apprentice joins, one of the first things they have to do in their first week or two of induction is to do their initial CV. And one of the things that we wanted from the new system was a sort of LinkedIn style interface where it was user friendly and people could update their own profiles themselves. And so, I think you remember my simile or metaphor. I said it was a bit like gardening. If you keep on top of the weeds, it's okay in the mowing the lawn. If you don't do anything for years, and then suddenly you've got a massive thicket to contend. I think we're trying to catch them young and get them into good habits.
Right. Yeah. Being good data stewards, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember one of the challenges was that it was mostly the folks on your team and folks doing similar work of responding to these RFPs and these bids. It was really their responsibility to keep the individual's CV up to date, right? So oftentimes when they were responding to an RFP, they would pull someone's CV that was dated. Maybe it hasn't been updated in some time. And so really what we've done is we've transformed that, in that, like you said, everyone has something very similar to a LinkedIn profile where they're able to input their own experience. We also have reminders that go out to make sure that the profiles are up to date. And we also integrate with your back-end systems, whereby we understand who has billed against a particular project. So that can automatically show up on their profile. And then what they're expected to do is just input the work that they perform. So it's a constantly evolving set of data that's also the responsible of the data ship, or the data cleanliness is distributed across everyone, instead of having, maybe 100, 200, 300 people responsible for maintaining the consistency of this data. It's actually disseminated or distributed out to the people who know themselves the best, right? So when you're describing the work that you've done, it's best for the person who actually did the work to actually describe it, as opposed to having somebody else on a different team do that. So I think that was pretty transformative, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's I don't want to portray to all our viewers that it's all sweetness and light and roses in the garden.
Yeah.
Because there pros and cons to both systems. If you have one team of specialist work winners who own the CVs that go into bids, probably be more consistent. Maybe the language used will be a bit more, can I use the word salesy?
Yeah. Compelling. Yeah.
Whatever. Everyone finds it very difficult to write their own CV, don't they? It's always easier to write someone else's CV for them, or at least with their input. On the other hand, it does make it a massive task when you got 18,000 people. Like you say, your your work winners are unlikely to have the kind of domain expertise to be able to recognise that this niche bit of thing that I did is really, really important to another person in that field. Whereas by putting the responsibility on the actual user, you're probably losing some of that consistency, but hopefully it's a bit more, or it's more agile, it's more up to date.
Yeah.
Hopefully. It's more about them and what they did in the project. And I think one of the things that a database system like ikaun can do is take away from the users all the grind work of the formatting. Yeah. Because they're basically just entering it into a database, aren't they, with a nice graphical user interface. Ikaun can then, or many of these systems can spit out that data into multiple different formats. So we've got standard Arup formats in letter size and A4 size, in now 13 different languages. We've got some formats for commonly used clients, but our technical users don't have to worry about all that stuff. They've just got to keep content in.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the power of separating the data, the knowledge, from the display, from the output mechanism. And to your point, which I think is a great one, is that oftentimes you will present the Arup kind of formal CV format that has a nice picture and it has everything laid out in a certain very Arup branded manner. But then you also have these other forms like this Form 330, where the expectation is that it's in a certain format. And because, again, that the knowledge is separated from the document and it's not embedded in the document, what we're able to do is output into any number of different forms or different formats, including, like you mentioned, client-specific formats. Oftentimes when you're submitting work, whether you're in a framework or a panel arrangement, oftentimes the way that they want those individuals that you're presenting included in an RFP response is using their specific format, right? And so because of, again, that separation of data from format, we're able to accomplish those things.
Sure.
So let's move on a little bit about and start talking a little bit about the implementation itself. I think we've been alluding to some of the implementation aspects that we went through. But just to summarize the process that we went through, we did a proof of value or a proof of concept. So what Arup had laid out was a set of requirements and scenarios, very, very detailed actually, that they needed the system to meet. And so what we did is we did a 2.5 month proof of concept where we essentially implemented the system. We implemented ikaun. We imported a subset of their CVs. And what this allowed Arup to do was, one, provide feedback on the specific features of the product, but then also it helped them to identify potential gaps in the data that they were providing to us. It also gave them an opportunity to identify gaps within the product itself. And one of the areas after doing the POC that was actually really, really important and critical was we introduced this concept that we called a briefcase, which we have some screenshots and I'll show it to you here in a little bit. But prior to working with Arup, our concept was that you would create what we called a proposal workspace, which is like a digital workplace for a specific proposal. You'd go into that and you would add a whole bunch of people to it, and then you would export from that. But Arup's workflow was much, much more dynamic. And what they wanted the ability to do was quickly add individuals to, again, what we called a briefcase, which is kind of like a shopping cart where you can add individuals into this briefcase. You can organize them. You can create folders that can be shared with other individuals. So if you have a team of experts that are trying to find people to include on a proposal, they can collaborate. So again, the power of that that proof of concept, that proof of value was one, to assess the software, make sure that it works as expected, but also identify gaps in the software, and then come to an agreement on what the actual production implementation was like. And so after having done that proof of concept, we then moved into the implementation phase, armed with an insane amount of information as to what this is going to take to actually be successful, right? So it's one thing to roll out software and say, hey, Monday, send an email that says, hey, there's this new system. It's an entirely different process to go through the change management necessary to get people to change what they were doing on Friday to use the new system. So I know, Alister, when we started working together, it was really around the specifics of the CVs that you all had in place. And I think I want to just talk about maybe some of the challenges that we encountered, to let the audience know of, what to expect in a project like this. So maybe talk a little bit about how you were managing CVs pre-ikaun, if you will.
Yeah. I suppose, like many companies out there, that probably people listening to this, we had a central network drive with a tile on our intranet in SharePoint, and that central drive held Word CVs and PDFs, to be honest, as well. And again, this practice varied around the world in Arup as ever. So in some regions, the marketing and BD folk had primary responsibility for maintaining those CVs. In other regions, it was much more down to the individual, users and technical people. I think some sort of, features or aspects of that way of doing things, it wasn't mandatory for people to store their CVs there. Mm-hmm. And I think quite a few people made a conscious decision not to, because they were worried that their CV would be used on a bid on the other side of the world without their knowledge, and then they get a phone call saying, oh, by the way, Monday morning, can you turn up to Boston, because we've just won this bid and you're the PM.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah, some people didn't put their CVs on there. I think other people, quite a few of our people work across different market sectors, so they felt the need to have a rail biased CV, mm-hmm. and another highways or roads biased CV, and so on. And some people had up to 5 different CVs, each tweaked and tailored to a slightly different market, and including different project experience nuggets and probably different biography and that kind of thing. So of course, when they wanted to update their CV with their latest hits, sometimes they had to go in 5
different places. Yeah,
5 different places. Actually, coincidentally, around the time we started looking at this, you remember we rebranded. So we went from like a sort of black Arup logo to a slightly amended red Arup logo.
Right.
All that CV changed slightly, didn't it? So, just in a word, trying to do a word rebrand is no trivial task on its own when you've got 18,000 CVs potentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there was, we've discussed the search functionality with that. So that was in the sort of the old days. So it was often a bit of a trial finding a CV anyway. If you did find a CV, get a hold of a CV, it wasn't necessarily up to date or in the right brand or tailored to the market you wanted. So there was a lot of every bid involved a lot of time spent just getting a sort of decent baseline CV.
Yeah, and that just simply means that oftentimes the person was spending as much time doing formatting activities of CVs and other pieces of content as they did actually focusing on the client needs that are in that specific RFP. So a lot of time savings there. One thing that I want to do for the audience is I do want to jump into and show you some screenshots, because I know that we've been talking very, very high level. I think a visualization will be very, very helpful. But a couple of the things to keep in mind when implementing a solution like this is, as Alister mentioned, your back-end systems that we're pulling information from, sometimes these types of solutions will kind of shine a light on data inconsistencies. And so just plan for some level of rationalization, data cleaning that you might want to go through. Ikaun was implemented with Arup's backend data sources, so we pulled in a significant amount of information from their existing systems. So the ask of the user is mostly just, hey, what specifically did you do on this project? But we're pre-populating a large chunk of that information. Additionally, they will go in and input their experience and their expertise. So I think
go
ahead.
I want to pay tribute to our digital technology team, because I think you'd agree, having them on board and actually running the process, they provide a project management function, didn't they? So they were integral to the whole search, concept phase, the pilot phase you described, and then the implementation. And I think they did a great job. And whenever we came up against a problem of importing a certain field from another system, I think they were able to solve it, weren't they? And I think that led to the go live being, it wasn't without its minor hiccups, but no one was running around with their hair on fire, was they?
Yeah, and actually, that, to your point, that really does speak to the sophistication of your internal folks. Great project management, great organization in terms of collecting feedback, responding to issues, and I think the change management component was pretty important. Making sure that we had training in place, making sure that we had the right support individuals, because Arup is a global entity, right? And so that means that people are using this thing 24 hours a day. And so having people within those regions able to support them and get answers very quickly to challenges they might be having was critical to the success. And so, yeah, just making sure that you follow the best practices of a project, which is obviously have a plan, be adaptable, collect feedback, have change management as part of that. Do that proof of concept or that pilot so that you can learn instead of rolling out to all 18,000 individuals. We selected a smaller group at first and rolled that out for the POC. Now, having said that, we did do what we called a big bang deployment, which was literally everybody had access come one magical Monday morning. And, to your point, all of the work and the diligence that we had and the planning and the testing prior to that made sure that it was a pretty quiet launch, which is good, and a lot of people, we had upwards of 7,000 people actually hit the site within the first day. So it was a lot of people were going into the site, and like you said, there were no fire alarms that were going off, which is to me a very, very successful project. So so we have about 10 minutes left. I do want to jump into and just talk maybe for just a couple minutes this concept. So maybe why don't we just synthesize this concept of really where the value, the results in deploying a solution like Ikaun exists?
Yeah, well, this was just a hypothetical situation, wasn't it, that we dreamt up? But it's it's a hypothetical 6-day period during a bid where you've got to, someone has to assemble, 10 to a dozen CVs. And the top bar chart is how we would probably have done it in the old days. And the bottom bars are, how we could do it now. And I think the important bit graphically is all the grey time is not adding value. It's like it's stuff you were talking about just now, of reformatting, chasing people, all that kind of stuff. The really, really important bits are that sort of teal colour and the magenta colour, where you're actually adding value to the bid. You're tailoring the CV to match the clients and the bid's precise requirements. And in the process, you've got to hope you're scoring more points. So basically you've got a choice. You can either just bank the time saved and not do it,
take a break,
or you can use that extra time to as we said. So that's the hypothesis, really. We didn't go into this whole process saying or promising anyone senior that we'll spend less time doing CVs.
Yeah, we'll just increase the quality. We have more free time, spending less time formatting and actually generating value-added content, differentiating content, that kind of just-in-time type information, as opposed to the just-in-case knowledge. So let's jump into it. I know, again, we've been talking at a very, very high level here, but so what ikaun is ikaun is a CV automation and proposal generation platform. And so fundamentally, everyone within your firm will have a profile, and this profile, 90% of this profile will be populated by your internal systems. If you want to do it manually, where everybody fills out everything, they can. But what we found to be most successful is talking to existing systems, HRIS systems, back-end data sources, a data warehouse makes the most sense. And so imagine an environment where everyone has a profile, and this profile is specific to your firm, right? So what you care about as a firm is what's most important. Do you have practices, or do you have capabilities? Do you care about languages? What types of certifications are people collecting? Also, what type of expertise do you have? And so here, what I'm showing you is a demonstration environment that is focusing on a traditional consultancy firm that does things like audit. They do things like tax. And so what this is showing you is how the individual can come in and self-assess. Now, one of the things that we've been doing this for a long, long time, and we found that there was initially some friction on self-assessment, but it really is, you can create an algorithm by which you could assess someone's experience based on the types of work that they've done. But in reality, if you give folks some guidelines into what an individual rating means, for example, a 1 star is that you're interested in it, where a 5 star is you're a thought leader, you're writing white papers, you're really leading the industry. So there's this spectrum. So you provide them guidance, and we've had a lot of success in people being honest within those boundaries. You just give them what the means of each one of these stars are, and they're really, really honest and do really, really good self-assessments. So one of the important aspects here is that, as we mentioned, the creation of these CVs is based on the work that they've done. And there are 2 different types of work that people will have. One, they'll have work that they've done in the past, right? So you need to have them, meaning not at your current firm. So you need to give them the facility to input that past information. But in an ongoing basis, as they work for the firm, they're actually billing time against a particular project. So what we do is we integrate with that back-end system, and we have that project automatically show up on their profile. And then what they're asked to do is to, specifically in this scenario, is to fill out the work performed, meaning what they did. Now, we are using artificial intelligence to make this much, much easier. What we do is we look at all of their time entries. We look at other people that have that are in similar roles on that project, the work that they performed, and we use artificial intelligence to draft a description of the work that they performed, again, based on their time entries, as well as based on what other people have input for their work performed in similar roles on that specific project. So it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to want to use, we call it write for me. You won't want to use write for me and then just hit save. You'll want to use this as a co-author, a drafting mechanism. But again, it saves a lot of time and effort as it relates to crafting that specific work performed. In addition, you will have a directory. And again, this is our Arup's environment is far, far more complex. Obviously, a lot more people, a lot more specific filters. But within this environment, to find people to include on a bid, you're going to be able to filter based on any number of different parameters. And as Alister mentioned, you can use keyword searching as well. So sometimes there isn't a specific skill that has been mentioned in the taxonomy, but within their biography, meaning their self-description of their kind of opening statement, maybe they include those particular technologies or skill sets within that. So again, a combination of structured filtering searching as well as keyword searching. And then from this particular screen, what you're able to do is select the people that you might want to include in a bid or maybe an early stage credentialing document. And again, you're able to add those folks to this, what we call this briefcase. The important thing to note here is that to that challenge that Alister mentioned previously, which was that sometimes people had 5 different CVs based on industries, based on specific types of work. Within ikaun, what you can do is you can actually create versions of, in this case, Joseph's CV, where you're selecting specific projects, right? And you're not creating yet another Word document. You're just saying, hey, for this version of this, I just want to have these 5 projects. You can select specific projects, or you can create a dynamic filter where maybe you only want to include experience that's in a practice sector. So as they add new experience, it'll automatically get added to this particular version. So again, just very, very powerful in terms of managing different versions for CVs. And then ultimately the output is a beautifully formatted document that is to your design specifications within Word itself. So we always strive to do pixel perfect renditions of your designs. If it's possible in Word, it's possible within ikaun. This one is actually more of the standard corporate template, but also know that when you hit export on someone's profile, you'll have the opportunity to select different templates. One could be that Form 330. One could be a client-specific layout. So you'll have a whole bunch of different options as it relates to laying to the output itself. The other thing that's important to note is that within ikaun, you will have this expertise dashboard that will give you insight into where your experts are distributed potentially across the globe. And what this allows you to do is drill in and really figure out what is the firm best at. It'll also, if you're looking to get into new lines of business and you know that there are certain skills that you need to realize that business, it'll also show you gaps within the environment as well. And again, once you have all of your CVs, you're also able to create what we call an RFP workspace. Again, a digital workplace where you're able to upload the RFP documents. You're able to select the people that you want to include in your response. You're able to include firm-wide content. Maybe it's on diversity, maybe it's about the firm. And you're able to stitch together these documents very, very dynamically using the database of your people biographies and their experience. Here, what's being demonstrated again is that right for me. Oftentimes you might receive like an Excel document that has 50, 100 questions in an RFP. What you're able to do is upload that Excel document and then use our Right For Me technology to go out and look at all of your past responses and craft an answer to that specific question. So the world that folks might live in today, which is that, hey, I read a question on RFP and you say, I know I've answered that 50 times. You go and you scramble to your local C drive and you kind of find the RFP that you previously responded to. You kind of hunt and peck and find that answer. Where with ikaun, it's all within the environment and we're using artificial intelligence to craft that answer for you based on previous answers. So again, leveraging artificial intelligence in a way that is in line with the workflow itself. So giving you artificial intelligence the moment you need it, as opposed to just being this kind of generic, for lack of a better term, chatbot. So it's very, very practical in terms of where the artificial intelligence is layered into the product. And again, the output of these RFPs is a beautifully formatted document that is to your design specifications. And really, it's just all about optimizing that workflow, getting you out of the business of formatting content, searching for content, and allowing you to focus on those key differentiators. What actually makes a difference when you win an RFP? It's that, to Alister's point, that crafting of the just in case or the just in time information that really personalizes that response to the client's need. And so with that, I think just in terms of time, I wanted to get to a couple questions, but what you're seeing here, if you want to learn more about ikaun, feel free to scan the QR code that will take you to a link that will, we can collect some information. But there's a couple questions that did come up. One was, does the tool fix spelling mistakes? Absolutely. So we do leverage artificial intelligence to do that. So it can correct all spelling mistakes. To Alister's point earlier, which was one of tone and consistency, we can also customize the artificial intelligence so that it has a tone, so that we can give it examples of what a work performed section needs to look like. We give it some examples, and then the responses that it provides it's in that specific tone. So yes, on the spelling mistakes, as well as on tone corrections and consistency as well.
Yeah, I have to say, you know, Arup, we didn't go with the AI add-in, did we? Because I think at the time we were doing this a couple of years ago, I don't think AI quite evolved to that extent.
Yeah.
And I think there was a nervousness at senior level of, you know, jumping into the AI thing on something that was as integral to the firm's you know, intellectual property, as you like, or as our people's CV. So we haven't done that, but definitely when people are writing their project experience entries, it highlights spelling errors with the, you know, the wavy red underline.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and we'll take one more. So let's just let's see. So we have one. What were the key criteria or considerations that guided the evaluation of the proposed solution? There were actually quite a few. There were about 7 different themes that were listed out. It was ease of use, the ability to create a CV, the ability to stitch a proposal together. So it was actually really a pretty thorough process. And that's, you know, that's part of the process that you all will go through, which is what is important to us. You know, what are the pain points that we have as it relates to responding to RFPs? So it is important to list out your specific requirements. There is another, let's see, do you work with U.S. federal contractors? Oh, sorry, go ahead. Did you have a comment, Alister?
Yeah, on that, Jason, I think what we learned, well, one, we did actually learn quite a lot by doing a sort of scan of what had been going on in Arup in this space around the world. We found at least 7 teams around the world that done a homegrown solution to, you know, part of this problem. So one, we learned a lot from the people who've done those. 2, we found that the requirements changed, you know, sometimes subtly, sometimes quite radically between different geographies and regions. You know, what one region considered personal information wasn't always the same as what another region was willing to put out on the tool. So I think we had to craft the requirements quite carefully. So it wasn't just the lowest common denominator, but it was a tool that would work for pretty much everyone.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. I know that we are out of time. Alister, I wanted to thank you for your time, and all of you know, working together with you has always been a pleasure. So thank you very, very much for not only today, but also the past couple years of working together. It's been quite an adventure, and I really do appreciate you. So thanks again for taking some time today.
Not at all. Great working with you, Jason, as ever.
Wonderful. A big thank you to both Alister and Jason for sharing their knowledge and insight with all of us today. Thank you so much. A reminder that by registering for this webinar, you will receive a post-webinar email, which will include our webinar feedback survey. We really value your opinion, so we appreciate it in advance of you filling that out for us. To our attendees, the recording of this webinar will be available on APNP TV shortly. Thank you all again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.